luck, and today we are going to go over for our What to Know Wednesday video how to braid your horse's mane. So if you're going to show in your English classes, this is junior, hunter saddle, fancy equitation, working hunter type classes, hunter hack, knowing how to braid could be helpful. So some first things is making sure you have the right equipment to do this. And so you need some type of yarn. Ideally you want a yarn that matches the color of their mane. So if you have a bay horse like this, black yarn, brown horse, black yarn. You may want, I have two different sorrel colors here. If you have a sorrel chestnut. And then also a spray bottle. I just use water. However, a lot of people do use like a spray gel or something like that. If you're going to have braids that need to stay in for multiple days, having a spray gel can be helpful because it'll hold your braids longer. If you're just braiding for like the day and then you're going to take them out, just water should be sufficient. Also, it depends on how clean or how dirty their mane is. If you have a really clean mane, you might want a spray gel to help hold it together. In our case, Junior's mane's quite dirty, so water works fine. Scissors, some clips of some kind. It can be anything. It's just really to hold hair out of your way. A brush, and then some particular pieces of equipment that I really like to use. So I have this little comb, and it's for dividing their mane into 3 little parts. Also, I use it as a guide for separating out my sections. It's not required for braiding, but I do find it helpful. Also, this little piece of equipment is my favorite tool. It's just like a large giant needle, and I use this for threading my yarn when I'm tucking up the braids. Some people do use one of these for that as well, and you can use either or. I just find this more difficult, and I like this a little better, but you can do it with this just as easily. So this little braiding kit that I have here that I'm wearing, I bought it at a general tack store, and it came with most of this stuff in it. It does have some extra pieces, or I've lost some pieces. It's kind of old. But the first thing we're going to do is going over how to measure out your yarn. So the best way to do this is to take your yarn and to basically like wrap it, how do you do it this way, around your elbow and up. And then so depending on how long their neck is, how thin or thick their hair is, you may need more of these. But one loop around would be 1 braid. So if you think you're going to do about 30 braids, which is probably pretty typical for doing their entire mane, you would wrap this around 30 times. Then you want to take it off, take your scissors, and you just cut it on the end, and that's going to give you long pieces that are perfect for doing your braids. Okay, so you can see here that I've already kind of started, and mainly because I wanted to not make this video super long, but also I'll show you how to do the braiding, and then we'll tuck some up to make the nice pretty braids and show you how to do this. Now there are multiple ways to do this. I'm just showing you the way I was taught. If you do it a different way, keep at it. Practice makes perfect. So a couple things you're gonna need is your clips, and then I would say make sure your horse is used to the spray bottle, but I do think it's helpful to have some nice wet hair. It helps grip. So then, and typically I would start back here and work all the way to the head. Sometimes they're kind of sensitive when you get up around their head, and so starting there can be frustrating for them, but a lot of times by the time you get there, if you started this in, they're sick of being braided and they're falling asleep, and you can get it done. Or your horse may be the opposite and you need to start at their head and work your way back. So kind of figure out your horse of what's gonna work best. Okay, so then I use my little 3-prong, and I use it kind of as a guide to know where to separate the hair. And so then the piece I'm gonna braid, and then I'll take the clip that hair out of the way, and then I'm just gonna take, and I'm gonna get a piece of yarn ready. And I'm gonna sit it right there, sit a couple, and divide this into 3 little pieces. Trying to make them as even as possible. And then you're just gonna start braiding like a normal braid. And then about halfway down the braid is when you are gonna add in your yarn. So I'm about halfway down. I will say the yarn sometimes starts to tickle them. You can flip it up. So take about half of it and you wanna put half on each of the outside 2 pieces. And then you're just gonna braid like normal with that piece of yarn in the braid. And then you're gonna braid all the way as far down as you can, and then pinch it. And then the way I like to tie this is I take both pieces and I wrap it around the braid, and then I just take the ends through the loop and then pull it, and it'll make a nice knot. And I usually double this because I don't want a chance that they're gonna fall out. So a nice thick knot. And I do have some hair at the end. We're gonna tuck that all in when we do the braid at the end. So here, I'll do one more. So you can see. I will say too, their mane's usually thinner down here and it gets thicker. So I would start with slightly larger sections at this end so that when you get to here, your sections don't have to be super thin. So start with a little bit extra hair when you're sectioning off the braids at the beginning, if you start at this end, so that you don't get to that end or the middle of their neck where it's thick and then have to end up having super tiny braid or super tiny little segments to braid. I forgot to put this out of the way. So just braiding like normal. So like here, it's super thin. I really should have started with a little bit more hair in this one because this braid is not gonna be the same size. And ideally you want all the individual braids to be about the same thickness. Just realized I forgot to add in the yarn, so let me back up a little bit. Put that yarn in, so on both sides. Braiding it down in. And then again with your knot, take the ends, wrap it around and through the loop and pull, and then go back through again and pull. And then you just keep doing this for their entire neck. So then I was going to show how to tuck them up. Ooh, my stool. Okay, so this is where I use this handy piece of equipment, a little needle threaded. So I take the yarn and put it through here. And then I just take, and you want to go underneath and right up the middle of that braid and just run it through so you pull your yarn through. And one thing I actually do, when I will do all my braids like this, like the whole neck, because then if I need to adjust things, I can. And then I usually take and I run all of these up at the same time through the middle. And then after I've ran them all up, then I go back and tie them. And part of the reason I do this is when they're pulled up like this, you can really kind of adjust to make them like the same length for the loops so that your braids are going to be about the same size. So if you do multiple at a time and kind of all of them, it kind of helps. So then the next step, I can tell the yarn is tickling him, is to take, so you pulled it through, and so you'll notice like you have a little bit of those end hairs are going to be sticking on the side. But what we're going to do is we're going to tie them down when we wrap this now. So then take your yarn and separate it, you want to tie it. So just like you are tying your shoe or something, how you start like the knot, I do wrap it twice because then it'll grip and hold, rather than if you just loop it once, it will come loose. Okay, so it's like this, and then I take and kind of pull, and I'm gonna wrap this underneath the braid. And I kind of want to hold and try and make it nice and straight when I do that. So I just tied it, so now it's just like a loop basically. But as I'm doing it, I do it slowly so I can kind of tell if the braid is hanging straight. Then you want to take and do that same thing, so wrap it twice. And then you I always like push my braid to make sure, because I like my little bumps at the top to be the same height. So I kind of push it and get it started before I tie this, so it's hard to show you. And then I pull it tight once I have it kind of where I want. And so you can see my little loops are all about the same. So then I tighten it, and then I'm going to tie it again just to make sure it's like a nice knot that's going to stay. All right. And then all you have left to do is take and then just cut the ends. You do want to leave a little bit, but like if you use yarn that matches your horse's hair, you can't see that unless you're like right up here looking at it. And I can tell that my braid was this one was a little longer than the other ones because it's a little bigger. And ideally, when I'm braiding, I would want to be paying attention to make sure that the knots and the length of these braids are all about the same, so that these all end up about the same size. So hopefully this was helpful to get you started on braiding. If you have any questions or need more help, please let me know. Feel free to watch this over and over so that you can practice. But ideally, the best way to get good at braiding is you just have to do it over and over and over and over and over again. Well, thank you for joining us tonight.